Welcome to Incubators, view on the future of emerging technologies in California. My name is Eric Stokes of the California Energy Commission, and I'll be the moderator for this panel session. Just wanted to say a few words and really try to set a little bit of the context. This is really kind of an exciting time for clean tech startup companies. We're really kind of ushering in what we called kind of clean tech entrepreneurship 2.0. And just to kind of talk a little bit of what that means, we kind of go back 10 years ago, where clean tech was kind of the hot thing. This was around 2008, 2009. There was a lot of exciting ideas. Venture capitals and other investors were seeing a lot of excitement, thinking a lot of the same success they had in the software space around Facebook and Twitter. They were going to see similar successes in the clean tech sector, and they were investing quite a bit of dollars. And then something happened. There was a number of high-profile failures. VCs weren't seeing the type of returns. They didn't quite understand just how challenging it is to bring kind of a hard tech technology to the private sector and the time it takes to do that. And around 2011, 2012, the VCs really got out of the game on clean tech. And it resulted in a number of studies that basically said, what's going to be the funding model for clean tech startup companies? How do we start to bring these to scale? And so a lot of people really began to kind of dissect what needed to happen to try to really scale new technology solutions to meet some of our sustainability and climate change goals. And what we started to understand was that there really wasn't the infrastructure, there wasn't the ecosystem around some of these startup companies that could really educate them on what they need to do to convince investors, to convince businesses of their technology solution. And on the opposite end is investors weren't very well educated on the challenges and when they should be looking at startup companies, when they're investable, what the right pathways are for investing and helping to scale some of these technology solutions. And so a number of programs emerged around incubators across the state to really help to mentor a lot of these startup companies, begin to teach them about how to develop metrics that are going to resonate with the private sector, to help educate them on beachhead markets. And how do you identify those beachhead markets and then begin to scale? And what we're starting to see is energy startup companies are much more sophisticated on what it takes to actually successfully scale a new technology than they were 10 years ago. And a big part of that is from the four organizations that are joining me as panelists today. And they'll talk a little bit about their experiences over the last few years in helping to mentor and helping to essentially incubate some of these startup companies, some of the challenges they still see, and really some of the opportunities they are. So the way the format for this panel session will work is each of the four presenters will give a little bit of overview of their organization and the type of support they offer startup companies. And then we'll go into some Q&A. I have a few questions for them, and then we'll also turn to the audience for some of these questions. So our first presenter is Alyssa Gutner-Davis. She is the program manager for Cleantech San Diego, and she oversees the Southern California Energy Innovation Network, which is an incubator program that covers the greater San Diego region. Prior to that, she was an international entrepreneur coordinator for Karatsu Forum and connected US-based entrepreneurs with angel investor groups in Bangalore, India. She also served as director of international alliances and partnerships for the USI Accelerator, which matches US startups with Indian businesses and customers. So join me in welcoming Alyssa. Thank you.
Hey everyone, good to see you all here. So as Eric mentioned, my name is Alyssa Gutner-Davis, and I head up the Southern California Energy Innovation Network program, also known as SEEN, for Cleantech San Diego. Cleantech San Diego, just for some background, is a nonprofit member-based trade association. It's been around since 2007. And what we do is our whole mission is to accelerate clean technology innovation and the deployment of smart city solutions for the betterment of the economy and the environment. And we do that through public, private, academic partnerships in the region. We do a lot of advocacy efforts, and we also encourage investment in the region around clean tech. So we've been around, as I mentioned, since 2007, but in 2016 we were awarded a grant from the California Energy Commission to create an incubator program for clean energy startups. So now we're really supporting startup companies and connecting them with our network of public and private organizations that are members. And we do this in conjunction with a variety of supporting organizations, which are listed on this slide. All of these organizations previously worked to support entrepreneurs in San Diego, Imperial, Riverside, and San Bernardino counties, which are the 4 counties that we support entrepreneurs in. But they were all kind of doing it in silos previously, and there wasn't a focus specifically around clean tech. So this program brings them all together under one umbrella. Cleantech San Diego acts as the program manager, and we can provide a variety of customized services to support startups in the clean energy space through these organizations. To date, we've supported 39 companies. I'll provide some additional metrics on the next slide. All of the companies that we support, because this program is EPIC funded, they all have an electric energy focus. So we're looking at things in clean transportation, energy efficiency, energy storage, and smart grid and energy services, which are often kind of software-based innovations. And we support companies all the way from concept stage through early commercialization, so typically like a Series B. And we provide customized services to them. So there's not really a one-size-fits-all approach that we've found for these types of companies. Whether you have hardware innovations or software, you have different needs. And so that's why we bring together this network of partners to provide a variety of services to them for free that they might not otherwise have access to. So we don't fund them. We don't provide funding, like we don't invest in them, but we provide like market intelligence, mentorship, pitch deck development, regulatory and policy assistance, all sorts of things, you name it. So we launched in January 2017. Our companies support 217 people, so they're employing a large number of people. Probably most impressively, since acceptance into the program, our companies have raised $43.1 million in private capital and $5.8 million in public capital since we've supported them. And we have diversity metrics that we frequently measure. We're really proud to say that 14% have women C-suite leadership, and we're hoping to continue to grow that number. And we do regular surveys of our companies every year, and all of them have indicated great satisfaction with the program and that we've helped them achieve business milestones faster than they would have were they not engaged with us. So we're really proud of what we've done, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who'd like to learn more after this session, and I look forward to answering your questions, and this is my contact info. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, Alyssa. So our next speaker is Helle Peterson. Helle joined the Water and Energy Technology Center at Fresno State in 2011, where she serves as program manager. She has actively worked in innovation and entrepreneurship for most of her career, first as part of the Central Valley Business Incubator, and later at Fresno State in the WET Center. Helle has earned a Master's of Science in Environmental Engineering from the Technical University of Denmark, and is an alumni of Fresno State's MBA program. So please join me in welcoming Helle.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for everyone that joined our session today. I'm just going to find the clicker right here. So as Eric mentioned, I am the General Manager of the Water, Energy and Technology Center, the WET Center at Fresno State. We're located on the campus, and we are part of the Jordan College for Science and Ag Technology. I'm also the Program Manager for the Blue Tech Valley Innovation Cluster, which is the project and the program we run together with the California Energy Commission. The WET Center was established in 2007, and the mission is really to work with water, energy, and ag innovative technologies and get them out to the marketplace, and to help both service some of the industry we see in our area, but also help build some great businesses and create some jobs in our region. At the WET Center, we have an incubator facility, we have office space, we have plug-and-play space. We also have testing capabilities. We have a 900-acre farm surrounding the campus on Fresno State where we can do different kind of demonstrations or pilot or research project that all relates to the needs of the companies that are coming through the doors of the WET Center. The Blue Tech Valley innovation cluster. We are one of 4 innovation clusters, as you can see on this map here. We have by far the largest in terms of geography, probably not in population, but we cover 39 counties out of California's 58 counties. So it's a pretty big footprint that we are trying to get services out to entrepreneurs in all these areas. That's why we chose a hub and spoke model and are working very closely with a range of partners, mainly CSUs throughout California. So we work with Chico State, Humboldt, Sacramento State here locally, Bakersfield, Monterey, and then this entity called the Business Development Center in Truckee as well. And our goal is to make sure that we reach all entrepreneurs in this area that has some kind of technology that can benefit the California ratepayer, that we provide services either at our main hub in Fresno, but also out in the individual hubs so that the entrepreneurs can get what they need closer to the areas where they want their or should have their business thriving. We have a bunch of other partners. Some of them are mentioned on this slide here. I won't go into details. But what we're trying to do specifically, we have an accelerator program, which is a 3-month intensive program that takes place in Fresno. And it's a little different than some other accelerator programs. We don't give any funding. We also don't take equity. We're very focused on creating revenue for the companies, teaching them actually sales skills, because eventually, even if they get investment, they have to learn how to sell their product. We also have very close ties to our local industry, so we are sure that the solutions that we are supporting actually is a problem out in the real life. So they're not developing and spending money on finding a solution to a problem that doesn't really exist. We have incubation. We help with funding or access to. We don't have funding ourselves, but we have partners that does. So we try to making some of these connections to the entrepreneurs. A little bit of numbers. This is for the Blue Tick Valley when we started that back in 2016. We have vetted around 300 companies through our intake process, where we spend about an hour or so listening to the companies and see from a technical point of view if their technology makes sense, and then guide them on what their next steps should be. Out of these, we have worked with about 179, and 53 have gone through our accelerator program. To the top right over there are some of the companies we have worked with or are working with. You probably don't know any of the names, but I hope one day that they will all be household names and you will know who they are. But they're really a wide range of companies, from Biofilter, which is doing low energy wastewater treatment, to Box Power, which is solar power in a container, to Membion, who has a new membrane that they are working on. So really a diverse group of technologies that we see come through the Blue Tick Valley. And I just want to mention the last one. As you can see, 68 of our companies are in the area of industrial, ag, or energy, and that is really our main focus, just because where we're located geographically. And this is my contact information.
Okay. So our next speaker is Nneka Uzo. Nneka is the Director of Energy Innovation at Elemental Accelerator. She leads Elemental's energy verticals and supports its energy portfolio companies on their path to scale, leveraging her experience incorporating innovation into PG&E and next-era energy resources and creating inventive solutions to address underlying issues. In her role, Uzo has ushered billion-dollar deals and projects related to mergers and acquisitions, capital investments, energy and sustainability, customer strategy and experience, innovation, and organizational design. So please welcome me. Sorry. Yeah, Renee.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nneka Uzo, and I'm the Director of Energy Innovation at Elemental Accelerator. And I know this is after lunch, so if we could take a second and just reach up really quickly, and exhale. Yes. I see everybody just woke up a little bit extra. So I really love my job, and I could talk about it for hours, but I have spared you. And instead, I'm really going to put on the focus of designing for equity and climate change. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about Elemental Accelerator. So Elemental Accelerator is a startup accelerator that's based in Honolulu, Hawaii. We're about 10 years old, and how we came around was through the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. So when Hawaii was designing its renewable portfolio standards, they were looking to invest in technology that would help stop climate change, improve renewable opportunities for the residents of Hawaii, and they discovered, one, that a lot of that technology is yet to be designed, and two, a lot of that technology is designed for the mainland and not specifically Hawaii, whose energy grid and system is slightly different. So with some funding from the Office of Naval Research, Department of Energy, and a variety of other private entities and organizations, the company was called Energy Accelerator. So they invested in companies primarily thinking about how to get companies past that valley of death that comes with startups. So a lot of startups kind of come in through pilots. And if you know how large organizations work, you can have death by pilots. And in fact, you could have a pilot on how to do pilots. Secondly, it doesn't necessarily help a startup scale commercially if they're only practicing with one or two products per company. So we came up with 3 tracks. One is the go-to-market track, which is really focused, and this slightly up, but which is really focused on companies that are in the seed, pre-seed stage, which are interested in doing projects in Hawaii, Asia Pacific, or California. And these could be companies that have really great technology. We don't take technology risk and have patents and things, but they were coming out of a university lab or some guys who are brilliant out of their garage, but they might not have those business operation skills. So we offer consulting on market intelligence, sales strategy, operational scale-up, and messaging. And this is the slide from last year. I'm so sorry. It's up to $100,000 now. So it's a 9-month program. Next, we have our demonstration track. So this is where we kind of de-risk the idea of commercialization. And we partner with companies and cities and hospitals and universities to split the costs of doing a project. So we do project equity. So we could fund, right now, I'll give an example of a project that we're doing with one of our portfolio companies called Block Power. And they're working with the city of Oakland. They were working with PG&E and the local CCA to figure out how do we do energy efficiency on low-income housing, where someone might not make the initial capital investment for something that has clear positive NPV, but instead turning those cash flow from reduced electricity use into a financial instrument that could be tradable or purchasable by investors. So by supporting those types of projects, we de-risk it for the partner. That could be the City of Oakland or the CCA to say, hey, let me try this. And we offer a level of project management and connections to all of our stakeholders and partners. And then lastly, we have the equity and access. So as I mentioned, this organization was called Energy Accelerator. But in 2017, we came over to California. We partnered with Emerson Collective, which is a large social, philanthropic, and investment platform run by Laureen Powell Jobs, and thought about how we can create change within California. So we went from just focusing on energy and expanding out from energy to water, mobility, agriculture, agricultural and circular economy. So now we're Elemental Accelerator. So we definitely acknowledge that nexus of energy, water, and food in order to create the green economy of the future. So equity and access projects are specifically focused in areas that are considered low to medium income or orange or red by the Cal Enviro Screen. So if you're not familiar with the Cal EPA Cal Enviro Screen, that was a map that was created for basically to show the effects of environmental injustice. So it could be a factor of pollution, just poor water and air quality, and or historic redlining and economic injustice. So all of our projects in the equity and access track are specifically focused in those communities in California. So as I mentioned, I could talk about this for ages, but one thing I would love to talk to you about is this carbon budget. Has anyone seen this before? Oh, great. This is exciting. So this came from the Carbon Budget Project. So it looked at our global emissions year over year. And when they did the math, they said if we stopped peak global emissions in 2016, we would have 25 years to bring down our emissions to the point where our global temperature increase would not increase past 1.5 degrees centigrade. But in 2016, we did not do that. So, and here we are in 2020. And in order for us to reduce that emission, we have to be more aggressive about how we reduce those emissions. And if we don't hit it in 2025, you can see how drastically that steep curve is. So the way that we can do that is by bringing everyone on board when it comes to designing a new green economy. A lot of times when people think about climate change or environmentalism, they have this idea, not the people in this room obviously, but the people in the media have, the granola backpack people. But all of us are actually part of the story, and it's actually impossible to hit these numbers and reduce our emissions by this much without bringing in specifically people who live in low to medium income communities. So I just wanted to talk to you briefly about some of the companies that we've brought in our 2019 cohort, who are our 8th cohort. So we have 17 companies total this year, bring up our total investments into 99 companies, $30 million invested from us, and then we've gotten about $350 million in follow-on funding by venture capital firms. So when organizations like ours and the accelerators do the due diligence and tell people how important these companies are, they're ready to sign the check, but they're not always ready to that initial risk themselves. So I think there's 5 companies that are probably useful to those in this room, and we have way more on our website, so I just want to talk you through them. First is Allume, and Allume is changing the way that multi-family housing gets solar. So they are the first company to offer solar for renters, solar for condo owners, without changing their tariff. So this means a lot because people historically in high density areas have lower incomes sometimes, and now they have access to get solar. We have Jupiter, which is focused on climate change using weather patterns and predictive analytics. So if you are a port that's located on the edge of the water, you can see how a tsunami might potentially affect your infrastructure, but also affect the whole community. So it gives cities, towns, universities, et cetera, impetus to change their infrastructure or make changes in the way they do business. OhmConnect is a company that is based in the Bay Area that gives people money for reducing their electricity use during high usage days. And why this is important for the low-income communities is that in the Central Valley, people actually pay way more for electricity than they do in the Bay Area. And in Sacramento, you could probably feel the higher temperatures as well. So when it comes to actually curbing electricity usage residentially, the Central Valley and other parts of the state are actually way more important than the Bay Area when it comes to reduction. So by using behavioral change and gamification, they're able to reduce people's electricity use. Very quickly, Gooder is looking at how we use food waste. So restaurants, convention centers, airports, et cetera, usually end the day with a bunch of food that's normally thrown away. Gooder picks up the food and then allocates them to the food bank. But they also track what food is thrown away so that business owners can get tax credits for the food that they donate. And usually their tax credits are about 5 to 10 times the amount of food that's donated. So they actually earn money when they donate the food. And then Kidget, which is creating small electric vehicle chargers in communities that don't have space for chargers and connecting them in community centers and churches. If you have any questions, you can contact me here.
Okay, so our final speaker is Stephanie Yashinsky. As Flow Rocket Fund Executive Director, Stephanie oversees the commercialization programs at Caltech's Resnick Sustainability Institute. Trained as a scientist, Stephanie built a successful consulting company serving a diverse high-tech clientele seeking finance and partners in London, Europe, Singapore, and Canada. At Caltech, she's helped over 300 clean tech companies and launched the Rocket Fund in partnership with Southern California Edison, Pacific Gas and Electric, SDG&E, SMUD, LADWP, and the Moxie Foundation. So thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. So, as I was introduced, I work for the Caltech at the Resnick Sustainability Institute, and there I oversee the commercialization programs, and I've done that for 8 years. And during that time, I may have worked with maybe 300, maybe 1,000, 300 teams, 1,000 entrepreneurs, and saw them struggle with trying to fill a funding gap between the lab and the garage and the commercial marketplace and their customers. So in 2015, Caltech got together with the Moxie Family Foundation in San Diego and with the ETCC group, that we had a group of visionaries there, to form the Rocket Fund. So what is it? So our mission statement is this, is that we're a grant program that helped young clean tech companies validate their technologies with their customers. This slide is really important because it shows you the gap that we fill. If you look on the left-hand side, you see the phase of development of the company, starting from startup funding right up to revenue growth. And on the right-hand side are the sources of funding for that. Now, these days, actually, it's relatively straightforward to be able to find startup funding, either from research grants or from friends and family or your credit card. If you're lucky, you can jump over the next stage and receive bridge funding from some commercialization grants, maybe through an incubator relationship or from an accelerator program. That'll allow you to build your product. With that, you can then go to equity financing, VCs or angels. They can fund you to start scaling up your product. And then with that, of course, you then have a customer base. You can build a customer base that establishes the foundation for your company. The problem is that second phase, support funding. There's still precious little money out there to be able to get you through that gap where you have to develop a commercial prototype, begin demonstrating it in the real world, and that is what the Rocket Fund is set up to do. So we operated in stealth mode, pilot mode, for 4 years. But we were pleasantly surprised to find that, in fact, we had some really interesting results. And part of the reason for that is our success is because, first of all, we fund fast growth companies that have interesting technologies and a very strong team. But secondly, it is because we provide money for things that grants won't cover and investors certainly won't pay for it. And that includes buying equipment, buying parts, achieving UL certification. That's very expensive. It's expected right from the moment that you move out of the academic lab or out of the garage. Lab testing and validation. Also, a lot of these companies don't know how to scale up. They don't know anything about bringing a product through a manufacturing process, and we provide funding for that as well. We cover a broad range of technologies. Obviously, with our utility support, we want to address the priorities that utilities are facing. So that's energy efficiency, the usual areas, demand response, DER, storage increasingly, microgrid. But we also broaden our reach into sustainability. So we funded companies in CO2 sequestration, for instance, ag, water, energy nexus, and of course, renewables. So our results are actually quite successful. We give relatively small grants between $25,000 and $75,000. And we're always surprised that that amount of money can have quite an impact on these companies at the right time. To date, we funded 26 companies. Of the 19 that were funded up to this year, they have secured $35 million in follow-on funding, either a seed or a Series A. They have also secured $10 million worth of customer orders, but that's probably an underestimate, to be honest, because they won't obviously reveal all of their customer sales. We were excited that one of our companies, SkyCool, was able to lead and then eventually win a $1.7 million CEC grant with EPRI as a partner. And we've had our first exit, actually. A Caltech startup, EV charging company, ED PowerFlex, was acquired by EDF. So how are we supported? We've been very fortunate to pull together a group of members of like-minded organizations that has grown from the original founding members I mentioned, which is Caltech, Moxie, and the ETCC group, to include Cleantech industry players. So Itron is a member, EPRI supports us. We have a close working relationship with the Wells Fargo IN2 program. And I'm really proud to say and very grateful that we have a very close working relationship with the Fortech clusters. There's a couple represented on the platform here, and with the CalSeed program. And there's benefit to our members. I just want to say that the business model seems to work because the members get to see really exciting technologies. They have access to innovative teams, potential business leads, and at the very least, they get to see the future of technology development. So I do want to make an outreach here, and that is that it's clear there's an unmet need. Last year we had over 100 applications, and we could only fund a small number of those of really good companies. So we're expanding our membership, and I would encourage you to check us out. And one way to do that is to join our Technology Advisory Committee so that you can review some of the companies. It's a very good way to get to know our Rocket Fund members and to see how the process works. I'll be available for the rest of the day. You can come up to me and talk about it, or you've got my email address there where you can contact me for more information.
Okay, so we have a few moderator questions. I do want to make sure we have time for the audience, so I'll maybe kick off the first question, and maybe Stephanie, you can kind of take the first stab, and the other panelists will feel free to weigh in. A number of studies over the years have talked about how the VC model is broken or is the wrong model for clean tech. However, in the last couple of years, we started to see more deal flow for clean energy startup companies. What do you think has changed or is changing that is making clean energy startups more attractive to investors into the private sector?
Well, Eric, when you posed that question, I went back and I did a lot of review and a lot of thinking. Okay. A lot of thinking about this question, and it turns out that the picture is a bit more complex than simply more money going into clean tech. Certainly, there is new interest. I know of 3 major investment groups, 2 on the West Coast and 1 on the East Coast, that are forming climate funds. And but what is not clear is that the game-changing technologies, what we call hard tech, are going to get the funding that they need to be able to scale up eventually and to produce the products that we need to change the sustainability landscape. So on the positive side, investments are actually gaining better returns. So there was a study by Cambridge Research Associates that was published in July that showed that the IRR had increased from negative before 2013 to a return of 23%, and that's a dramatic turnaround. And why is that? Well, part of the reason was that you mentioned earlier, Eric, is that not only are the companies getting smarter about how to frame a good business model that will attract investment, but the investors themselves are getting smarter. They know now how to assess risk better than they did in 2010, for instance. They're also taking a much more hands-on approach, much more interventionist than they did before. So they provide guidance, they provide resources, and they'll also provide management support, which they didn't before. But when we say that they're getting smarter about their investments, what they're doing is turning away from those types of investments that really don't give them the returns. So for instance, manufacturing has dropped. There's a shift away from that to 2 other sectors actually that are showing better returns. And this is much more directly related to the kind of companies that we look at and we see. So for instance, something called energy optimization. batteries, smart grid, and energy efficiency is gaining more traction with investors. Something called resource solutions, wastewater treatment, for instance, sustainable agriculture, which of course you're very interested in, and environmental services and mitigation. So all of these are not only getting more investment, but they're giving better returns. I would say that another reason that investment is showing more interest is because the model has changed. In 2010, they wanted to invest in big-scale projects that had serious commercial risk. They didn't know it at the time because they couldn't assess it, but that was the pattern then. And what they're doing now is that they're investing in fast-moving companies, scrappy companies that have done a lot of customer discovery, they know their market, and they target markets where they can dominate. And these companies live by their techno-economic analysis, where they can set the price that really matches what they can sell the product at. And those are the kind of companies actually that we see coming to the Rocket Fund mostly. I think another reason that investors are getting more comfortable again is because there are funds like the CalSeed Fund, like the Shell Game Changer program. Chevron has an innovation program, and there's IN2 Wells Fargo, where they put a bit of money towards these early companies to help de-risk the technology. And of course, Rocket Fund falls into that category as well. So they're seeing, they don't have to actually spend their money, their risky money on de-risking the technology. That's increasingly being done for them because of these programs that have come into place in the last maybe 3 to 4 years. But the jury is out about what I call the game-changing technologies, because those still have a long ramp-up time. They may take 10 years before they can come to market. They're going to require probably millions of dollars in scale-up funding. And I have to say that from what I've seen, venture capital is still steering clear of these types of projects. And there are a couple of VCs. The Engine is one. Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which you probably are familiar with, all have long time horizons and are prepared to work with these companies. But there's still definitely a lack of finance for companies, really good companies that come out of universities that I see, that have very strong technologies, but the management may still be immature, and VCs tend to steer clear of that. They still look for customer traction, they look for management that has brought product to market before, and that is really, the technology has been proven. So what are the companies supposed to do that fall into this tough tech category? Well, I encourage them to think about relying still on government grants when they can get them. There's a lot more available that are reaching earlier and earlier into the whole ecosystem. And also perhaps to think seriously about forming strategic relationships with these companies that have these innovation funds. I mentioned Wells Fargo, I mentioned Chevron, I mentioned Shell, but there's a raft of others. As long as you can form a good and fair strategic partnership with them. So I think there is a way forward, but there's definitely some uncertainty.
Just to follow up, so Nanika, you guys run more accelerator type programs where you're a little farther down kind of the TRL stage. Typically you see more interest from the venture capitalists, more interest from the corporate strategics. Where are you seeing, or are we still seeing a lack of deal flow for some of these startup companies?
I think we're seeing more interest now, as also Stephanie mentioned. We're moving away from Cleantech just being that heavy manufactured systems to more IoT software, things that maybe fits the traditional VC model a little bit better than some of those capital heavy types of technologies we've seen previously. So I do see an interest in that picking up. I think also as Cleantech is maybe a little bit broader now, it's more green tech, it's sustainable, you're using other phrases to describe the same thing, but that might fit some investment VCs thesis a little bit better, and that makes it interesting for them to invest in these types of companies. So I do also see from the companies we work with, VC funding is not necessarily always the route they want to go, because it also has some limitations, and especially in the ag industry, it's really difficult to provide the rates of returns that the investors are expecting, so they might want to opt and go in different directions.
I would add that we deal primarily with companies that have proven technology, so that's like a different kind of stage, but I'm finding that companies tend to be a lot more choosy with who they're taking money from. There's a desire for patient capital, so rather than the traditional VC who's like, expand with this hockey stick model, you're seeing companies be very thoughtful about not taking money or trying to use as many government grants as they can to get to a certain level, and or specifically relying on strategics that can open up certain doors for them. I can see that a lot of companies in this area are thinking about acquisitions as a way out of their business, whereas a lot of software companies might be looking towards the IPO or a different type of exit. And if you're thinking about the growth of your company through acquisition, it definitely changes the way that you take money and how you develop your product roadmap. I'll add this other kind of social thing that has led to the increase of investing is I think that there's a lot of people who want to be involved with like social impact investing, but they still also really desire a return. So I'm seeing a lot of family offices, angel investors, angel syndicates actually putting together more money to invest in some of these earlier stage companies where they believe in the value of the work that's being done in ways that I haven't seen for some of the other industries, just based on what people are seeing on the news and how they feel about climate change.
Did you want me to add something?
I know you've had a couple successful exits with the Cleantech San Diego. And does that seem to be more of the model with what you're seeing with a lot of these technologies?
Yeah. Absolutely, and I'd like to say the other ladies covered most of the points I was going to bring up, so nice job. But yeah, I would say there's been, I think in recent years, maybe partially driving the traditional VCs to rethink about clean tech, a resurgence of interest in the corporate community around investing in clean tech, and actually the entrance of new players in the ecosystem. Like we're seeing oil and gas majors coming in and investing in clean tech in a way that they haven't in the past. Utilities are doing it, specifically European utilities. One of our companies was acquired by NL, which is now NLX. And we've seen investments from EDF in some of our companies. I know EDF acquired PowerFlex from Caltech. So there's just a lot of activity happening in that space. And if they aren't investing directly, they're becoming LPs in a lot of venture capital firms. So they are kind of indirectly investing in that way. And so I think that there's a huge pull and like demand from the strategics to invest in clean tech, and so that's kind of then bringing out some new venture capital or spinning out some new venture capital funds, and I think that's really exciting. And then also, yeah, we have seen a lot more of our companies when they're kind of out fundraising, they're a little scrappy, they're kind of looking around at like what works, and they're finding a lot of fit with those early social impact venture capital firms. So it is exciting to see kind of those firms coming into the space. They tend to be a little bit more driven not just by the traditional like high venture capital returns, but also other metrics, so social impact metrics, environmental metrics. So the returns demands might be slightly lower, so they're a little bit more patient, and they're willing to fund these types of companies. And so there's been a great fit there, especially when we've looked at more diverse founders within our portfolio. Those like oftentimes women are going after funds that are kind of women-focused entrepreneur funds, or these kind of social impact funds. So I think that they're finding capital, maybe not necessarily always with just the traditional clean tech VC firms, but with strategics and with these kind of social impact or like diversity-focused firms, which are kind of interesting.
So I just want to do a quick time check. We have about 15 minutes left, and I want to turn to the audience to see if there's any questions for the panelists. Yeah, I think so. We have a question over there.
Question for all the panelists. Have you seen any growth in robotics in the clean tech, for advanced diagnostics inside gas pipelines, other things like that. So I'm curious across the board where you're seeing robotics meeting clean tech.
Well, I'll jump in because we actually put out a call for that kind of company last year, and we didn't see any. So it's interesting that like you, I feel that there's a huge opportunity there. And so we're trying to encourage entrepreneurs to think about that as a way of getting their foot in the door, if you like, with certainly the utilities and with the VCs that actually are beginning to look at the rocket fund companies. But I haven't seen a lot of them, no.
We saw a couple this year. So we got 800 applications this year, which is the most that we've ever gotten, but we only take 15 to 20 companies. And I think the impression that we got was that a lot of the robotics companies tend to be earlier stage, and the hard part with products like that is the capital investment before your product is impressive enough. It's really hard. This year we did invest in Can-Do Water, which is essentially a smart pipeline pig for wastewater, so it detects pollution very early. But yeah, the robotics is really tough. Most of it that I've seen is around like drones and asset management technology.
We see a little bit in the ag-tech space in terms of harvesting equipment and those types of automation and robotics, but not so much in the pure clean tech space.
Yeah, we haven't seen many of those either. I think there's more of an interesting intersection between biotech and clean tech that I've been seeing a lot of. And then also, if you're talking about like automation, like building automation or energy management systems, you're going to be looking at like the merging of software technologies with sensors, like cheap sensors, off the shelf kind of stuff, and creating these really awesome packages that are using machine learning or like really advanced data analytics to predict energy usage patterns or manage energy usage within buildings or with DER assets and things like that, but not so much, yeah, not a robotics play. I haven't seen any of those yet.
Yeah, and from the Energy Commission standpoint, I think there we have seen some robotics. I don't know if it's robotics, it's some of the drone technologies and some of the sensing equipments around kind of wind operation and maintenance. We've also had a portfolio of projects specifically around pipeline safety and really trying to detect some of the vulnerabilities in the pipeline. But like the Air's mentioned, it's kind of a tough space, and I think you mentioned just the capital cost needed to get them to a stage, even to kind of a prototype stage, is pretty significant.
And retail, I think we have maybe 15 or 20 robotics, drones.
Interesting.
So it's interesting because we have dedicated robotics centers like Mass Robotics for 60 companies, and then green companies are now 20. So
Yeah.
interesting. And then you say the capital is a big issue.
Yeah.
Sure, question back.
Hi, I had a question mostly focused on the incubator teams there, or groups. So I work for a national lab, and I have a potential startup in mind for one of the projects that I've been working on. So my question for you is, like, when you described the support that you might give a potential incubator, and you described it as sort of like there's no money available, but there's a lot of advice and guidance, like, practically, how does it work? Let's say I'm based in the East Bay, and you guys are in different places throughout California. Like, do you hold conferences where you come and be educated? Like, what are the processes? How long is that? Is it like a year-long process? Is it like 2 years? Like, could you explain a little bit more about what actually happens?
I can take a stab at that. Well, first of all, so Hele and I, we're part of two like incubation clusters that are funded by the CEC that are focused on regional innovation across California. But there's actually two other ones, one in the greater LA region and one in the Bay Area. So the one in the Bay Area that is kind of our equivalent is Cyclotron Road. So you might want to look into their program. If that's where you're located, because they're going to be looking at entrepreneurs in that space, although they look specifically at hard tech because they're in partnership with Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. And then there's a number of others that I'm happy to refer you to that are in in your area. But some of them offer funding, some of them don't. So because we're CEC funded, we have to offer our programs for free. I know that Elemental Accelerator offers, as you saw on her slide, some capital. So that's kind of a different model, but all of them have slightly different models. So it's about finding the one that works best for you and the one that has like technical expertise or industry connections that are most aligned with the technology that you're looking at. So like Central Valley, obviously their focus is going to be really heavily on water energy nexus technology. So if you have something like that, they're going to be a center of excellence for you. For us, we're kind of more broad-based, but we're finding like that there's a lot of companies in the electric vehicle space happening in San Diego. There's a lot of energy storage stuff happening in San Diego. So it's just kind of like finding the program that has the model that works best for your business, as well as the connections that are going to work best for your business. And they can range from like a year-long incubation period to us. We do it as long as we feel that we're delivering value and the company is reporting properly their metrics to us. And then there's others that are like 3-month accelerators, 9-month accelerators. So it all kind of depends on your needs. Hopefully that helped answer your question a little bit better.
And I can speak to what we're offering specifically. We also do an ongoing enrollment, if you will, where we'll meet with you. You will hear about your technology. We'll figure out what is some of the things you need help with, and we can determine if we can help you or if any of our partners can help you. So we'll refer you, but still work with you as well. And then we work with you on an ongoing basis. We also have an accelerator program, so that is 3 months where you have to be in Fresno for a couple of days each month, and it will end in a demo day. So that is our most stringent program, if you will. We do a lot of things remotely because we cover such a big area, so we do a lot of webinars, we do a lot of Zoom video conference calls and things like that as well. But we try to get resources out to as many as possible, not having to necessarily come to Fresno.
For Elemental specifically, we have the demo and equity and access projects that we pay up to $1 million on 50% of project equity, and that's just as long as the project takes. We'd like them to be between 12 and 18 months, but we know that life happens. For the go-to-market track, which is the capital in exchange for some equity for helping you develop your business further, that's a 9-month project. So starts off with our kickoff week in Hawaii that we just had 2 weeks ago, and we focus on a couple topics. So at this time, we were focused on market intelligence and diversity and inclusion for and culture creation for companies. And then you'll get monthly coaching from some of our coaches. We have one that's from LBNL, others from industry, and then we have another in person. I think that one's in Maui, and that would be stuff like sales strategy and operational scaling. And once again, after you do the in-person for a week, you have monthly check-ins with your coach, and then we end with our investor conference, and we have like another session there, and it's all custom based on what your company needs.
I'll just simply, we're not an incubator program, but I will say that with our applicants, what we try to do is establish connections with potential, I call them mentors, but they're industry experts that can help guide your product development, your technology development in the right direction. We have a channel relationship with the Electric Power Research Institute, for instance, that can provide access to lab testing and their technical expertise as well. And if you're selected to work with them, then that can be an open door to a lot of help that can help you guide your product development, I keep talking about validating the technology, and eventually connect with other members. They're a national membership group, international actually, with utility members, and it's really a valuable way to be put in front of a very large group of potential supporters and sponsors.
I'll just add one thing. So in addition to the incubator program, the Energy Commission also established a small grant program called CalSeed. And that kind of provides that first little bit of funding. And it's typically for researchers coming out of the universities or national labs, and they are spinning off into a startup venture. And so it's that CalSeed provides up to $150,000, and then recipients of that are eligible for kind of a $450,000 plus up. So the way we designed the program was to have the incubators provide the support services, and then CalSeed provide some of that direct grant funding.
I'd like to also add, like, you don't have to choose one or the other. So eMotorWorks is also, we also invested in them last year. So
And Kidget.
and Kidget.
just joined your equity and access.
yeah, Kidget, and then
So we all work with each other.
we all
We're
work with each
very-
other.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool, actually.
Because we come in at different stages, you know, like Elemental is going to provide that capital that we can't provide, and like connections to the Asia Pacific region that we can't provide. So like there's always going to be something where you might be in one accelerator incubator and then later you'll be ready for a different one, and it just kind of depends what your path is.
Okay, so I think we have time for a couple more questions. Any more questions from the audience? Oh, sorry there.
Thank you for a great panel. It's really interesting. Nika, I think it was you who mentioned Callan BioScreen and its ability to identify frontline communities. I'm wondering if any of you have sort of outreach or specific cultivation that you're doing in those communities to build sort of ground up capacity and success in entrepreneurship that can really spur local-based economic development.
Sure, I could start. So we just started our equity and access track last year. So this is our second year. When we started the organization, because we are kind of like a startup ourselves, we thought about how do we kind of address these issues from like a meaningful type of way. One of the things that we did was set up a California Community Council where we took leaders from all over California, Stockton, Imperial Valley, Central Valley, northern like Redding, California, and brought them into our office, and we meet with them the same way that we would meet with a board. One of the cities that has been really thoughtful about engaging is Stockton. So they were part of the transformative climate communities, and we've been working with a fellow there, Ann Rogan, who has brought us in. We took some of our companies that want to do business there and took them to a groundbreaking of a housing development where they're interested in, bringing in as many green tech tools for the residents there, and then trying to find employees as our companies are expanding. So we invest in companies that are international, but also want to do business specifically in LMI communities in California, these frontline communities. So we advise them, if you do want to hire, these are the areas that need jobs the most, and these are the organizations where you can have access to some of these resources.
We do a fair share of outreach to rural disadvantaged communities as well, being in the Central Valley where we're located. And we try to do it both to see if we can find technologies or business models that will work for these communities to get more clean tech technology implemented, or finding entrepreneurial solutions that are developed there to stimulate economic development. So we're trying to do both of those. It's not an easy task, and it takes a lot of work. It takes some great partners that can help distribute the information and find the right partners in those communities. But we are definitely, it's very much on our radar, and we are giving it a good effort.
So I know both ourselves and also the Blue Tech Valley, we applied for Department of Commerce grants to kind of facilitate economic development work in some of the communities that we serve. So within the SEEN program region, Riverside and San Bernardino counties, there's a lot of areas within those two counties that are considered disadvantaged communities. And so what we did is we decided we need to do some ecosystem building in that region, because you can't just have, like what we were finding with starting the programs, you can't just offer entrepreneurship services when there's like very little in the way of an innovation ecosystem that's robust and connected there. And so what we've done is we've hired a part-time program manager who's working in that region to do kind of the groundwork of like bringing together different stakeholders that have clean energy interests, different stakeholders that have done work to support entrepreneurs in the past or are planning to do more in the future, and getting them all talking to each other, so that as because we've seen that the ecosystem is starting to develop around innovation out there, and we want to make sure that clean tech is kind of part of that innovation ecosystem, like it's one of the areas that people are focusing on, because there's a lot of problems in that region specifically related to transportation emissions, pollution, and all sorts of things. So we are working really hard in that region specifically to try to kind of build a foundation for entrepreneurship and clean tech innovation, and that's going to take some time for sure. It's all about getting us like a whole industry cluster together in the way that one was formed in San Diego in 2007. It's only just the beginnings of that happening out there, but you need all the people to be working together first for anything to happen. And so what we're trying to do is have those dialogues, have those conversations, and make sure that all the resources are like kind of under one umbrella. So that's just like a start, but we're hoping to do more work in that space.
Okay, so I think we're out of time. Please join me in giving a quick round of applause for our panel members. I just wanted to give a quick couple plugs. The Vice Chair of the Energy Commission, in her opening remarks Monday, mentioned that a couple weeks ago, we launched Empower Innovation, which is a new platform to help connect people that are working across the clean tech space. We have a table and a booth out there, so if you're interested in learning more about it, please stop by. Also, the Energy Commission will be hosting, along with our utility partners, I think this is the 5th annual EPIC Symposium. It is April 1st and 2nd at Sacramento State. We're hoping to get kind of the registration, save the date out in the next couple weeks, but kind of please mark it on your calendars. With that, thank you, everybody. The next session begins at 2:15, but